Hi, I'm going to bring out the walrus next time. I forgot it inside now. And use this. This has got 3 different resistances on it to give you 3 different brightnesses of LED. So it's a nice little test. The walrus, which I did in 1987, 1987, might have finished it in 1988, can't remember, is a little bit unique because it was the first one I put a light into. Now, I don't know what I put into it because it's all closed, but it has wires coming out the bottom, and I sort of remember putting one LED in there. That was, you know, a big thing for me at that stage, put an LED in the aeroplane. But, you know, as it goes, how often do you really connect anything to it? It's just stayed on display in a cabinet in the corner for decades and decades. Now what I'd like to do is just have a look at what sort of shine out I get, even though the walrus has got very minimal place to see that. So we'll connect this and hopefully something happens. I can't remember. Hope I haven't blown it at some stage. At some point I might have tested it with the wrong voltage and blown it. We'll see. Now, thinking about what I said about the lighting in the Wellington, the lighting, the LED lighting, putting in sort of 7 or so strategically placed LEDs, which you can then choose which ones come on and what brightness you want and so on, doesn't really address the issue of seeing all of the internal detail. It makes it cool to look at, and it's one step better than not having lighting inside as far as being able to see anything on the inside. But it doesn't really address having all of that nice detail on display. Second thought I had, which I'm not very keen on, and I don't think I've actually ever done it on any model ever, is do a sort of a section. Now, you wouldn't be able to do this on the wings, so you'd have to do this. Very difficult to actually even where you determine where you do it, but let's say some sort of panel that you take off and then you can just look straight in, but you can put it back on to see your complete aircraft. That's a very low ranking suggestion, but there's just so much good to see on the inside here. Anyway, I can't even really do LED tests because so much of this is going to be closed up. All of that is not really adequate. It's nice to see light out of, keeping in mind that once this is closed up, there's only how many windows? I don't know if I can actually adequately tell here. 1, 2, maybe 3. Can I see it off there? 1, 2, 3. I think it's 3 windows, which you're then looking through this geodetic structure. So, you know, you'd be able to see a little bit, but it's a very restricted view. But I don't really want to cut up this very nice Wellington. So at this stage, my particular one, and you're welcome to do obviously whatever you think exposes it better, but I think on mine the only real method I have at the moment is to build in all the nice detail, all of the nice bulkheads, put in the LEDs, and that's it. What you're able to see is what you're able to see, which inevitably means that if you don't have the lights on and you're not looking very closely, you're not going to see it. Second option is you take photos as you're building, and the photos are your remembrance of what's on the inside there. So I guess that's all I've got. I've, build it well, close it up, put the LEDs in, make a nice little system of internal lighting, take photos, and that's it. So that's sort of the plan for the Wellington at this stage. Now, one of you asked if I can really remember how I did that. And I mean, it is the chipping method. So, but the thing about it is the chipping method can be used to obtain such a variety of chipping. I have done it 3, 4, 5 times on different things, and this is completely unique. This is by far the best. The only thing that I can say so far is the final layers of paint, in this case that couple of variations of grey, is thinly painted. Because the more you need to scrub to get through, and by scrub I mean rubbing with a cloth, rubbing with a very light bristled brush, rubbing with a heavier bristled brush, gives you different effects. I think I do see a little bit of bristle mark here, which means there may have been, yes, there probably was. So if you look over there, there is some fore-aft straight line and on the leading edge of this side a little bit of straight line there. So it must have been the type of rubbing, a fairly soft rubbing, and it gradually goes through into the hairspray, loosens it enough, and then with very minimal rubbing you just get this release. And knowing when to stop is the other thing, sort of getting a nice even rub. So anyway, that's what we'll try on the other models. Some of the parts are so beautifully even. So the nice thing about this model is it shows all of the types of areas. Here where it's almost completely gone. Wherever you look, there's sort of different. Even that tail plane there, which has got a different effect than all the rest. And of course the amount of spray. Now I don't know how we are going to determine how much hairspray I did. So it'll, for instance, be quick once over pass. Now a once over pass like that wouldn't quite cover the wing, so it'll sort of have to be a once over pass being 2 passes. An attempt to do a single pass, which isn't really one pass with the hand. That would be a thin hairspray. Letting that settle, and possibly a second would be a second hairspray. And the thickness of your hairspray affects things as well. So we'll have to do a good set of interesting tests there. I've dug through some of my models, and I think I'll show you what I've got. So this one I think might be a not bad candidate, even though it's actually a very good model to do in a pretty mild deterioration, as if it's possibly actually still in service. And the reason I say this model is because it's pretty simple and a fast build and a nice aircraft, and clean. You've got a lot of nice big surface area. Now actually on this model, which is interesting, some of the areas are glossy. You see as I turn it like that, some panels are glossy and some are matte. Now that might cause different adhesion of the paint and the hairspray, which is good because that means more variation of effect. Here the cowl doors are done in that somewhat slightly more matte, whereas the main cowl is glossy. This is the same, and then I don't have to worry about these sink marks. You see those sink marks there and there. Now I mean, you can't be angry about these sink marks. This is a 1960s model. I can't remember what I said, something around 60s. You know, just build it and do a nice weathering on it, put on the decals. I'm not sure. Yeah, okay, so now we're back at that issue of the decals. So I can't really use decals unless I'm quite, especially I'm thinking about that one. I can use decals doing that method by which I'll partially cover them in paint. But for the nice Indian, you have to, you sort of really want to still appreciate it and yet it look aged at the same time. So we're going to be in for a little bit of a challenge there. So I think that's a good one for, now while I say this, it's a good candidate for a chipping effect. Taking separate pieces of plastic, not even really a paint mule, not an old aeroplane, but just bits of plastic, you know, probably, you know, bigger than that, but at least that, let's say at least that, doing for each scheme, for each category, ranging from very light weathering to very, very dilapidated, of which I would say this one falls into the, you know, 8 out of 10 of how dilapidated it is. Maybe 3 of these to trial the effects, because you just don't get the same thing twice in a row. But we'll try. So what I was saying is, you know, when I'm going to try a particular effect, let's say the light effect, I still need to practice it 3 times, get the average of what I got out, document it, we'll document it on video as well, and then carry it through on the aeroplane and hope that we can, you know, have adequately described the exact method and action, hand actions, you know, amount of pressure, amount of spray, what type of acrylic did I use, how thick did I spray it. This one is one of those models that is sort of barely on my list of, even though it's quite a nice model. I've spoken about this one before. Very good quality. It's not, I don't mention this one because it's low quality. It's actually recessed panel lines and all very good. But I'm quite happy for this to be in a very heavily chipped scheme and standing in a small diorama as if it's been there for, you know, decades and decades. It's more parts than the P47. I won't put on the rotors. Interior will be covered by very yellowed windows and that sort of thing. You could possibly have cracked windows as well, but I think that's another one, and it's a much smaller surface area, so that's a different sort of approach. You know, the amount of surface area that you've got to rub allows you a certain feature. Now I'll just show you again on this one. One thing you might have picked up, which I need to be careful of, when you've got a nice open panel, centralized rubbing. So here where there's things, there's far more likelihood that paint remained. It's not always the case. Bottom surfaces got actually a very, very nice variety. This one got more over there. So you do have to be careful that you don't focus all of your chipping onto there because it was nice and easy to do, over there because it was nice and easy, over there because it was easy. Those are, of course, nice exposed flat surfaces, so there will be chipping there, but try not to just overdo it on the easy areas and not much on others. I don't know if I would dictate exactly whether this one would be light or heavy, but scale does sort of come into it now, because the actual granularness, let's say, of the chipping, if you transposed the Impala's one onto this one, it might not give exactly the same effect. You almost want a more scaled chipping effect. So we might be talking about something that I haven't tried, and that is how to even scale the chip by possibly having very thin layers. So what I did on the Impala, maybe doing even thinner layers on here so that you can get those chips breaking off away from the painted surface in tinier amounts, in tinier little granules. Don't know, we'll see. Because very large chips seems very out of proportion. And now this is the same. I grabbed this one out. Remember this one that I did very rough, slap together build to look like a derelict, but absolutely no chipping. Now imagine if we introduce chipping. So this is obviously same scale, but you know, a lot smaller surface area than that. So just pointing that out. Can't do chipping on that now, that's already finished, but this doesn't carry that weight because it just has a nice even tone on it. So the chipping, really, we've got to get that right. Would I do it on that color? It's not impossible that we could actually do chipping using that as the color scheme, which would look quite interesting. Not with the decals though, I've used the decals for something else. This one, and in fact another armor piece I'll show you now. This one has, we can do heavy large chip weathering, even though, as I said, armored vehicles have a very tough paint, and don't judge the chippings too much by what you could and couldn't achieve in reality. It's just for an interesting model effect. These models really is for, you know, more artistic license. It is almost impossible that you would ever see an Impala like that. So what's nice about this armored car is it's got quite a lot of side surface that we can do, but it's also got enough detail. This one has got sort of the same. Now this one I have done work on it. So we do have those two pieces. Now that, I think this is going to be a good candidate. This has got a lot more chassis. In fact, you know, guns and what have you. And the chipping is really only for body work. We won't be doing any chipping on chassis. It's not much point, it's all hidden. This is, the model is standing there, and what you see, which is basically all of the large iron plates, you wouldn't do chipping on the inside. That just doesn't really fit. but you would paint very rusted, very corroded. So in the end, the amount of paint that is present on any interior and chassis area is just almost non-existent. It's almost all rusted up. But the heavy paint from the surfaces is maybe more interesting. I'm not sure if I should just completely leave the gun off or do it and just have it very rusted. And the reason I mentioned this one is because it's one of those that is tagged along. Do you see the date when I bought that written in pen there at the top? 94. December 94. So it's sort of due to get some bit of attention. And that, so what was the other aircraft that I mentioned? Last time, what did I, oh, the Sky Raider. That's right, the Sky Raider. So if we have a P-47 and a Sky Raider, the Sky Raider can be, Sky Raider's got more surface area, and one can almost, now keep in mind I have to do the 3-color camouflage, but one can, I don't know, even if I have exactly the same style of chipping as that, but it was on that 3-tone camouflage, it would stand out a lot more. Because what I was going to say is bigger chipping, but actually no, not bigger chipping. It'll be more visible just because it's not so light gray like that one. And integrating the decals into the build is part of this challenge. So okay, just remind me in your comments when I get to do those set of samples each time. So for instance, 3 of them with a very light hairspray, 3 of them, and I need to mark them adequately, they all need little pen tags. 3 of them with medium hairspray, 3 of them with heavy hairspray, and then within each set of 3, light final sprayed acrylic, mediumly sprayed acrylic, a couple of coats, and then somewhat heavily sprayed acrylic. The heavier you go on that final is the bigger chips that you get, the more angular and broken look versus what I got on this Impala. So that'll give us sort of a 3x3 matrix of hairspray technique. And that I put decals on each and every one of them, so that not only are we doing the card test samples, I must also be careful I must choose something that doesn't bend that easily, because otherwise you just bend and crackle all your acrylic layer off by manual action rather than the hairspray releasing it. Put decals on from my scrap decals and see how well we can integrate them. So we do two trial practices at the same time, the paint and hairspray aspects in interrelationship, but also the presence of decals. You can even put up to 3 decals on each one and just see what sort of effects we get. So I think that'll be quite cool. I mean, that's not imminent, that's it's a little bit of a something for now that I have that plan. Gradually I'll get the little sheet plastic cards ready, so that when I'm in a position and able to do the preparation spraying and the base colors and the hairspray and get that, even if the models aren't built yet, that'll give us an interesting idea of how to head towards each particular model. We can have a plan for what we think we're going to achieve on a model, and then do it and see what we actually got, which will be interesting. I think that's about it. Thanks for the comments, you guys. I do read them all. I haven't had time this weekend to really reply much, but and let alone any modeling. There's just too much going on. But I thought I'll just record this one quickly. And if you have any further interesting comments on the Wellington, keen to hear. Okay, happy modeling. Cheers.